Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today's discussion is going to get stuck into the art of brilliant infrastructure client behaviour. Well, what's that, and why does it matter? Surely the client's the client, and whatever they say goes. The supply chain's task is simply to deliver. Well, absolutely yes, and absolutely no. Getting projects set up for success from the start is the fundamental job of the client. Brilliant client behaviour should allow the project success that flows to be shared by all stakeholders in the project. But just how often are clients brilliant? And if not, well, why not? Well, to find out, my guest today is Nirmal Kotecha, Director of Capital Programmes at UK Power Networks and a past chair of the Infrastructure Client Group Management Board. Nirmal is also a board member of the Major Projects Association, so has been thoroughly embedded in the challenge of understanding what works and what doesn't work for clients when it comes to major project delivery. Nirmal said recently that defining clear outcomes from infrastructure investment is going to become a key competence for clients in future. And he added, this will form the basis for driving significant change in the way we procure and commercially incentivize organizations to ensure that they are fully aligned in the pursuit of the desired outcomes. So what does that mean in reality? What has to change and who has to lead? Well, let's find out. Nirmal, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast today.
Anthony, good afternoon. Pleasure to be with you.
It's great to see you again, Nirmal. And so let's hit it head on. I mean, I deliberately avoided the term intelligent client to talk about the art of brilliant client behaviour. To you, what is brilliant client behaviour? I mean, do you recognise the concept?
I'd like to think I do, Anthony. Look, I'll give you, this is not from a textbook. From my scars, I would distill it down to 9 key points, and very quickly. Firstly, a brilliant client behaviour demonstrates clarity of vision and outcomes, and those outcomes and vision are informed by their stakeholders. Works right to left. In other words, works backwards from the outcomes and develops all the kind of the checkpoints to deliver that. Is obsessive about health and safety for its staff, supply chain, for members of the public. Importantly, it communicates those expectations very, very clearly and creates alignment all the way through that value chain. It's able then to develop a procurement and delivery strategy to deliver those expectations. In order to do that, it needs to have the appropriate skills, or I would suggest the emotional intelligence to know where it doesn't, to bring in the help to plug those gaps. And just to finish off, and building on the emotional intelligence piece, it needs to have, if you like, the ability to create a culture and an environment that provides a platform of trust where actually it's safe to showcase bad news, not showcase, but certainly highlight bad news early such that that can be intervened in a timely manner. And finally, it's got to be curious. And what do I mean by that? By being curious, I mean it's got to be more in the camp of what if versus if only. The what if is all about anticipating, being proactive, anticipating what could go wrong. And there's a fantastic kind of ideology on something called pre-mortem thinking that can play into that space, as opposed to if only, which is tinged with regret. So that would be my kind of summary.
Brilliant. Well, that's it then. 4 minutes into the podcast, it's all sorted out then. It's all completely sorted out. Thank you very much. No, but it's very, very simple when you put it like that. But I suppose what's still stopping those very simple 9-step plans from happening?
Firstly, Anthony, old habits. And we'll no doubt cover it later on. But wherever I've been, the first thing I've had to do is confront old habits. And old habits always get in the way, yeah. And once you've kind of got past that, you've got to have a view or the appetite to understand what good looks like. And once you understand what good looks like, you've then got to be open-minded enough to change or drive the change that may be necessary, if appropriate. And that, again, requires courage, depending on how deep-rooted some of those old habits are.
Right. And I suppose you talk about defining clear outcomes. I mean, what does that mean in reality? I mean, clear outcomes for who?
I mean, this is probably one of the most debated issues in infra delivery right now. And I'll give you my take on it, which has two flavours. Yeah, I think there's the first and obvious flavour is from the public sector perspective, where, clearly there's a set of outcomes that go beyond the benefits that will come when you cut the yellow ribbon on whatever asset you've constructed. Because you layer on top of that social value, you layer up levelling up, you layer up net zero, the economic benefits that may come from that investment, be that employment, whatever it might be. And I think you can almost create a mental picture of ever increasing circles from the core output. And the further out you go, the more distant the outcome becomes to the actual project. When you look at it from the vantage point of a private sector, and let's say regulated client, I think there's increasingly more convergence, because certainly even private sector, and I've been in both, are moving into the space where social value is increasingly important, net zero is increasingly important. They won't necessarily have a specific brief to create employment, levelling up, etc. So there is a convergence, but there are subtle differences between the two. And certainly public sector is more macro in its span.
Right, yeah. We spoke a lot about that a couple of weeks ago with Michelle DeFranca on the Infrastructure podcast about social outcomes and about the power of social outcomes to really deliver more than just an infrastructure project. I talk about brilliant clienting, but let's get to good, I suppose. I mean, why does it matter that clients do behave well?
In my experience, Anthony, clients have to take the lead. I have yet to see anyone in the supply chain knock down my doors to say, Mr. Client, you're missing these tricks. I have tried, believe you me. But I think that is a reality. That's a brutal reality that we have to accept. And if the client doesn't lead, it won't happen. In my view, a demanding client will generate better habits, because the supply chain will either up its game or it'll lose its business.
Right. Because I suppose a healthy supply chain which is winning, a supply chain which is making a profit, is going to deliver you a better result at the end of the day. Absolutely.
At the end of the day, it's in no client's interest to see its supply chain fail. There's got to be a win-win outcome.
So how does the Infrastructure Client Group help? I mean, how is it helping to drive that required change? It's been around quite a long while now.
Yeah, and I was one of the four musketeers who kind of made the case for the client group way back in 2010. And the simple premise behind its creation was that there were a number of singular clients who were having the same challenge with the supply chain, ostensibly the same supply chain, where the supply chain would say to me when I was at Anglian, Nirmal, you want all of these things. You want Alliance, you want us to do X, Y, Z. Why should we destroy our business model for you as Anglian Water? I've got 200 other clients who don't asking for any of this. So the simple premise behind the Infrastructure Client Group was, let's create a critical mass of clients who are kind of who understand the direction of travel and ask the same things from the same supply chain.
They're all on the same page, effectively.
Essentially, because I found whether it was water, roads, power, gas, the supply chain was the constant.
Yeah. Interesting though, because clients, they're not all the same, are they? I mean, I avoid the word intelligent clients, but you can have intelligent clients who, I suppose, like UK Power Networks. You do an awful lot of stuff in the project and in the infrastructure world. You've got other clients who, their assets are a means to an end. They're a way to deliver their service to their customers. Building stuff is an inconvenient distraction. I mean, how could the supply chain kind of help, when you have these different sorts of clients?
Well, I guess to me, the purest intelligent clients that need to be intelligent are what I would call the recurring clients with a big asset already, asset owners, asset managers. For me, that's got to be a core competence. When you look at then some of the mega projects and some of the pop-up projects, which are in a different league, there I believe you've got to be at least an informed client, such that you recognize what aspects of that intelligent client layer you've got to have within your camp, such that you can manage your advisors who will act and give you that proxy intelligence. But if you miss that step and don't have that informed presence on your board, as it were, then I think you're asking for trouble.
Right. And because I just say not every client has got the depth and the kind of the patience that a client like yourself has, Nirmal, I suppose. That's one of the challenges. I mean, your bio talks about you working with startups, turnarounds and transformation programs involving the supply chain, and I presume that's all around bringing that experience and, as you say, the scars that you carry to the party. I mean, give us some examples of the work you've been doing in that area.
So I've already outlined my brief at Anglian, which started as a response to their AMP3 challenge. So there was a strategic review that said you're spending 60% of your income on the supply chain, you need to fix it. And that sort of grew into the delivery model. That's the @One Alliance. But if I then move to my 4-year tenure at what was the Highways Agency, I was brought in on the back of the Nichols Review, way back, because that was commissioned, as you know, under the late, great Mike Nichols. And he made God knows how many recommendations, probably when you and I first met, actually. So my brief at the Highways Agency was, again, it was to build on the experience of collaborative working, alliancing that I'd cultivated at Anglian, to say there's 2 or 3 things that I had to deliver at Highways. Firstly, restore credibility with the Department for Transport. The next spending review was going to be disastrous unless we restored that confidence. But fundamentally, it was to improve client-side capability, particularly commercially, to manage the roads program, to make sure that the things that Mike had identified, we addressed through that growth in intelligence as a client. And in terms of UK Power Networks, I've been here nearly 12 years now. I joined the executive team in 2011. This was a year or so after acquisition, at which time the business was seen as one of the poorer performing distribution network operators. And our vision from day one was very much to take it to number 1, which I'm glad to say we have. Now the challenge is to stay there.
Yeah. I mean, utilities in particular, I see the supply chain really battling constantly to deliver, what is effectively quite low margin work in an increasingly challenging environment. It's about keeping the workforce and the public safe, minimising disruption in usually very high traffic locations. I mean, how do you square those circles for where you get work becoming more and more difficult and regulated and margins getting lower?
Well, in essence, Anthony, and this is true for whether it's water, gas, or power now, I think there are 2 types of deliverables. Linear assets, which require a lot of digging up public highways, and non-linear, which are your substations, your water treatment works, etc. What you're talking about is principally in the linear asset space, where it is more commoditized work, no question. And the challenge is, as you summarized, there are huge safety aspects, planning issues, getting consents from local authorities is becoming more and more of a challenge. Understanding what's in the ground before you dig it up. Right. And, utility strikes are a bane of utility companies because they create safety issues, they create delays, and they lose confidence with the local authorities. So the solution to that has to be, firstly, learning from each other. And again, that's where organisations like the ICG can help. Better stakeholder management, improving performance to get that confidence, accessing the right records in terms of assets, being innovative, using tools like GPR and so on and so forth to try and make sure that you don't add to the woes of low margin by having lots of rework. Yeah.
So it's using GPR, ground penetrating radar, technology. I suppose you're talking about digital tools to aid the planning. I mean, is that happening out there? Or is that investment happening?
I think it is. Whether it's happening quickly enough or wide enough, jury's out. But I'm certainly close to a number of very exciting things that we want to test and pilot. So ask me in 12 months' time, whether some of the tools, which include better use of AI, by the way, actually will be part of the answer.
Okay. I mean, the reality is, though, the sector in many ways has got itself into a bit of a muddle over cost versus quality, over output versus outcomes. Would you say that? I mean, is that changing?
I think clients have over the years certainly better got to grips with the trade-off between cost and quality. I think the whole basis of right first time, is genuinely sinking in. And if you've got the right commercial models, they should encourage more right first time, in my books. And it may mean you've got to spend a little bit more upfront to ensure the quality downstream. But again, part of being an intelligent client is knowing what those trade-offs are and finding the sweet spots. But also in terms of outputs versus outcomes. And certainly in the regulated world, there is a lot of focus on actually delivering the outcomes without building anything. Yeah, looking at demand-side response, for example. So if you can achieve the outcome without spending a pound, then it's the right answer for the customer and all the stakeholders.
Okay. Let's talk about you for a moment, Nirmal. You mentioned earlier about the different things you've been doing with Anglian Water and at Highways Agency. And of course, you're now at UK Power Networks for the last 12 years. Where does your career heart lie? Are you a roadsman? Are you a waterman? Are you a power man?
My career heart lies in infrastructure.
Right,
and
okay.
if you like,
you're in the right place here then.
Desire to do things better. And I'll be honest with you, I still have a huge soft spot for Anglian, for highways, and obviously the power sector. I've learned so much from each of them. It would be a tough call to pick one.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because at each point in those careers, Anglian was really kind of moving the dial, or still is moving the dial in terms of what it's doing with its delivery. Highways Agency, as you say, went through the Nichols review. It was a big moment. I mean, how have you set up each of these organisations for success then?
I think the first thing to do is, and I heard Michelle Dix talking a few weeks back about the know-it-alls versus the learn-it-alls, which is
right.
part of Matthew Said's kind of one of his books. And I think you've got to go in with a learn-it-all mindset and a growth mindset. If you go in with a degree of arrogance that says you know it all, you're stuffed.
Right.
And I've been fortunate enough that I've gone into industries where I've had no baggage. And I've been able to tackle things using first principles and probably more EQ than IQ. And really take time to understand and then get the client ready for the challenges ahead.
Because I suppose it is a very people business. It's about people. It's about working with people. I mean, you have been wrestling with some huge challenges around efficiency, productivity, change over the last 20 years or more. I mean, what keeps you enthused? Because the same problems must keep coming around.
I mean, two or three things, I guess. I mean, firstly, knowing what difference you can make. So even today, I'm hugely proud of my contribution in developing the At-One Alliance model. And I look back on that with a huge deal of pride and affection to say, actually, that's generated so many different incarnations, and I'd like to think it's pushed the industry in the right direction. So that's one part, to recognise the value in what you can see in the rearview mirror.
That's the Anglian Water At-One Alliance, yeah.
The Anglian Water At-One Alliance. Likewise, highways, we made huge progress in 4 years. And when I look at the industry at large now, I see so much potential. So when we look at some of the tools available now, I referenced artificial intelligence earlier, but some of the things, you can see that are happening out there across the whole value chain of asset creation, where some of this technology, they're going to be game changers. But none of that will matter unless we can provide the right leadership and take the people along with us to kind of realise those benefits.
You've got a lot of plates spinning there. How do you relax and take your mind off of work? Then what do you do when you're not procuring and driving and all sorts of things at UK Power Networks?
I inject frustration into my weekends by trying to improve my golf. But I've come to conclude that if you play twice a month, it's a tough gig to improve. But in my mind, Anthony, I have played the perfect round of golf, just never in the same around. And my other passion is Manchester United. So I'm a little happier this year. I could have been much more happy, but I'm hugely enthused by what's happening there for the season ahead.
I'm sure that you're sharing the successes of all Manchester.
No.
Fair enough. A few quick questions. Is UK Power Networks an intelligent client?
Well, on my 9-point checklist, I think we tick most of them, but equally we're not arrogant enough to believe we know it all. So there are clearly areas that we will always look to bring in support.
Should every client be intelligent, or can you be brilliant and inexpert?
I think certainly if you're a regulated recurring client, I think you're missing a trick if you're not. For others, I think each case on merit, but you should certainly be an informed client if big stakes are on the table.
Okay. You've mentioned a few of your past clients you've worked with as good examples. I mean, who do you turn to right now as an example of a brilliant client?
I take you back to my analogy of I've played the perfect round of golf. I think the perfect client, and this comes back to a plug for the ICG, the Infrastructure Client Group. The work of the ICG has basically concluded that actually the best client out there is a virtual one, where you've got to cherry pick bits from all of them to create this picture of what exemplar looks like. And I think we should be open-minded enough to steal with pride from across that model.
Let's talk quickly, just to finish off, about the future. You talk about the need for change. I mean, who needs to change? Who needs to drive that change?
Well, my family originates from the birthplace of Mahatma Gandhi. You know, he's been attributed with, be the change you want to see in the world. So first and foremost, we as individual leaders who are in the client space and in the sector generally all need to look in the mirror, test how many old habits we have that could be up for challenge. And then we've got to really use the vehicles we have available, such as the ICG, to create some groundswell momentum and all start demanding the same change.
Okay. I mean, given that the kind of infrastructure that we're talking about lasts for up to hundreds and hundreds of years, it delivers away, does it matter that we still deliver on time or fail to deliver on time and budget?
That's a really tough one. I mean, when you look at examine at all the case studies that would suggest we're not very good at delivering major projects, we've probably got to go back to the beginning and kind of say, well, if it's a recurring kind of project, it would be hugely disappointing if we persistently made the same mistakes. Yeah. So I would expect us to be a learning organisation that says, actually, next wastewater treatment works or power station, we should not make the same mistakes. We should be better. I think where it gets more challenging is on the first-of-a-kind types. The question is, are there genuine first-of-a-kind projects out there? But for those, are we setting ourselves up to fail? Yeah, are we genuinely clear about the envelope of funding and time that may come with the complexity of those programs of work? So it's always going to be important, but I think we need to give a bit more latitude to the big mega projects for the reasons I've outlined.
Well, on that, I mean, are we learning lessons from the past about project delivery, or are we still locked? I mean, the last time I saw you in person was at the MPA annual conference. We were talking about echo chambers there. Are we locked in these echo chambers of past performance?
The answer's got to be yes, we are. The NAO wouldn't be publishing everything it does each year with case studies that clearly demonstrate it's not happening. And I guess the missing $64,000 question is, why aren't we learning those lessons? Why is that amnesia affecting this sector? But I think we're in a better place now to capture and retain and hardwire something into a national corporate memory. So I think particularly the work with the IPA, bodies like the MPA, we should now converge and really take advantage of the time that is now.
Are there some specific blockages and barriers that you say that we still need to overcome?
I think in terms of the regulated space, I think we're unlocking those, because one of my mantras for the last 20 years has been, if you're a regulated industry, you get a 5-yearly program that's funded. That gives you certainty. That certainty is gold dust to the supply chain. And I think more and more regulated recurring clients are beginning to leverage that. I think when it comes to big public sector projects, political changes and things that happen, like Ukraine, like whatever, Brexit, like COVID, etc., that throw programs off trajectory. Stop-start to me is the biggest kind of thing that drives inefficiency. So anything that creates certainty as far as a pipeline of work is concerned, it's not just visibility of work, it's commitment to that pipeline of work. To me, that will unlock so much value.
Well, just finally, just to go right back to the start, Nirmal, the art of brilliant client behaviour, what would you say is the number one lesson that you've learned about being a really brilliant client? What lesson would you pass on?
Steal with pride. At One Alliance at Anglian Water, we drew heavily from T5. I spoke to some 40 organisations in the lead up to that blueprint. What we did was we stole with pride, but fundamentally we said, okay, how do we make it work in our world? So to me, that's a kind of philosophy I've taken wherever I've been, alongside, be open to learn.
Right. A great point to end on, and really kind of drives home that point also around those learning of the lessons of what's gone before. So thanks. I think it certainly gives us a huge amount to think about. So thanks very much for joining me today on the Infrastructure Podcast.
Absolute pleasure, Anthony. Take care.
Thanks, Nirmal. That's all we've got time for today, but we've got a lot more from the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website. That's www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background links to some of the issues discussed today and the latest podcasts to listen to and to share with your colleagues. So thanks for joining us, and thanks again to Nirmal. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.